today is attention-grabbing essays. So that was a really quick introduction to personal statements. And again, I'm going to save time for the end to answer questions. Now I want to segue into attention-grabbing essays. So I want you to think for a second about what has sparked your interest when you've read something. What was it about that writing? Was it that the author used really good words, that they had a strong command of vocabulary? Was it that their topic was really exciting because they were framing it in a way that you'd never thought of before? I just read something really interesting about deep sea creatures, for instance. I'm not particularly interested in the oceans, but the author was really humorous in the way that he was writing about these creatures, and so it was exciting to me. Is it the way the author incorporates different ideas from other people and then adds to them? Is it a hook that was really interesting at the beginning? Like the first line was funny. There's a lot of elements that go into attention-grabbing essays, and so often students can feel overwhelmed. They feel this enormous pressure to perform. They feel like they have to have it all mastered. The first thing I want to say about writing, even though there are these pressures attached in a personal statement, for instance, the pressure of whether or not you get into university can sometimes feel enormous. When you're writing essays for school, there's the pressure attached of the mark or the grade. I really want you, as students, as people, to start to see writing as a development process. Writing can be a great way to express yourself. Even though we live in this online culture where people communicate via video, written word is never going to go away. Essays are still very powerful. Op-eds in newspapers are still very powerful. Even posts on Facebook, on Twitter are very powerful. And that all depends on writing skills. The other thing I want to say is that writing is a process of becoming. Nobody is a good writer. They're constantly in the process of becoming a better writer. Even people like Stephen King, like Malcolm Gladwell, big names in writing, take a long time to develop their skills and are still developing. I bet if you asked an author today who's really famous what they think of something they wrote early in their career, they'd be super embarrassed. I've had that happen to me before. Even when others thought my writing was quite good, I go back and I look, I'm like, gosh, this is awful. And the reason I think that is because I have learned a lot in the 2 or 3 or 4 years since writing that piece. And you are the same way. Just because you struggle today doesn't mean you always will. Like anything, writing takes practice, and it is a process of being. Enjoy the process. I know that can be a bit weird to say. How can I enjoy the process when I have this personal statement due, or when I have a deadline on my essay? But really view it as a chance to get your thoughts onto paper. There's so few opportunities in life when you get older to have people read your words, like to guarantee that somebody will read what you write and have them respond to it. I actually think it's pretty cool when you're in school that you know at least your professor is going to read it. So really take advantage of those opportunities by trying your best. Don't stress, but approach it with a positive attitude as a learning experience. You will get better every essay that you write. That said, there are tips that I can give you right now to help you improve your essays in the short term. The first thing is to think about openings. Openings set the tone of an entire piece, and this is true in a personal statement as well. So think hard about them. Sometimes I write my openings at the end, actually. Students often feel, I have found, that they have to start at the first sentence and go all the way to the last. I once had a teacher, though, who told me something that completely changed the way I saw writing. And that was, start from the point of least resistance. And I don't know if it was like the scientific aspect of that my brain really latched onto, because I've always liked physics, or if it was just the simplicity of the concept, or the fact that she was giving me permission to not write from the first sentence. But that was really freeing to me. And now what I do is if I have an idea for an academic article or a book chapter or an essay that I'm writing, I just start with the image that's the most vivid to me or the idea that is most important. And I just start writing a paragraph around it. It might be that that paragraph ends up in the middle somewhere, but that's totally fine. I go back at the end and then I think about how I want to frame it all and put it all together. You often get better openings that way as well. And you're guaranteed to have an opening that connects to what is being said later in the paper. So take some time to think about your openings and don't be discouraged if it takes a little bit for that opening to come to you. George Orwell, famous British writer, was really, really good at essay openings. Not only was he very funny, but he also had a lot of really great ideas. So I've taken the first lines from some of his writings, and I'm going to read them to you because I thought they were quite fun. I'm also really bad at pronouncing place names, so I'm just going to preface with that. I'm probably going to butcher some of the words in here, but bear with me. This is my Kentucky coming through. My mountain accent. In Mulmine, in Lower Burma, I was hated by large numbers of people. The only time in my life that I have been important enough for this to happen to me. So he takes something, being hated, that's quite embarrassing, and he makes it funny. I loved that opening, and that's for his essay, Shooting an Elephant. That essay eventually goes on to be a political commentary, so it's talking about important stuff, but he's including humor. In My Country, Right or Left, he says, contrary to popular belief, the past was not more eventful than the present. So he's opened directly with an idea that challenges a previous thought. That can be a really powerful thing to do. And then perhaps my favorite, as an American who lives in the UK and misses American cooking, in defense of English cooking, we have heard a good deal of talk in recent years, and I forgot my opening quotation mark. I just realized. Imagine there's an opening quotation mark here because this is Orwell's words. We have heard a good deal of talk in recent years about the desirability of attracting foreign tourists to this country. It is commonly said, even by the English themselves, that English cooking is the worst in the world. So he's talking about a common refrain that he hears. It's kind of a funny thing to talk about. It is supposed to be not merely incompetent, but also imitative. And I even read quite recently, in a book by a French writer, the remark, the best English cooking is, of course, simply French cooking. That is a very funny opening. He eventually goes on to talk about the British culinary experience and how there is a culture of British cooking. But he's starting right where his readers are with something that they can connect to. So Orwell did really great openings, and I encourage you to read essays from people that you really enjoy to get a sense of how to start something. You don't have to start with, this paper will talk about British cooking. That's a lot more boring than the way Orwell frames his stuff. And again, this takes practice. It's a process of becoming. By the time Orwell wrote these essays, he had been writing for, a decade. So don't be too hard on yourself. Everybody starts somewhere. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is the importance of an argument driving essays. In the personal statement, the argument is going to be your mission statement, your why statement. In essays, it probably will be something more formal. I believe that British cooking is the best in the world. That's not a particularly great thesis statement. You certainly would want to develop that more, but an example of an argument that you could defend with evidence. Back in ancient times, the Romans used to build these arches. And they would have these stones in the middle, what's highlighted here in red on the diagram, called the cornerstone or the keystone. And the reason those were so important was because without it, the entire arch would collapse. Your thesis statement is like that in your essay. It is the driving force behind anything that you argue. So whether you're writing a why statement for a personal statement or an argument for an essay you're handing in to your teacher, you need to spend time to make sure that thesis statement is there and that everything else connects to it. Everything you write in a body paragraph should reference back to a part or a subpart of that thesis. Additional body paragraphs, again, should build to that thesis. And it holds up the weight of the entire essay. It keeps the whole thing from collapsing. Often what I'll do when I have essays is I'll spend time just brainstorming on a whiteboard. Okay, what is my thesis statement going to be? What is an argument that is big enough in scope to encapsulate everything in the body paragraphs, but is not so big that it's self-evident or too hard to argue completely? That takes some time. So give yourself permission to spend, an hour, 2 hours just thinking about a thesis statement. I promise if you do this kind of planning in advance, where you think about your opening, you think about your thesis statement, and you outline an essay and how these things connect, your writing will be so much better. It also makes it easier to actually sit down and write because you've been thinking for a long time about how these pieces come together. It's going to be more cohesive when you put them on the page. My next tip is that strong paragraphs, as I said, connect directly to the thesis, and that they should begin with these topic sentences that are actually many arguments. One of the things I see students do a lot is start a paragraph with a statement like, they might say something like, Marxists argue that education perpetuates class-based inequality. Okay, that's a good statement. It shows a student's understanding of a Marxist perspective and issues in education. But far better would be a statement that says something like, Marxism is stronger than the new right perspective because it understands that class-based inequalities drive the educational system. That is an argument that Marxism is stronger than something else for a reason. It's not purely a descriptive statement. It's an analytical or an argumentative statement. I want you to try to make your topic sentences like that. It'll make your paragraphs so much stronger, and it'll also help you to get good marks on college/high school essays that you might be writing right now, or university essays that you'll be writing later. So think about topic sentences as mini arguments. And then when you write your paragraphs, think about it like a museum exhibit. You can probably tell by now I really like metaphors and analogies, and so here is yet another for you. A good paragraph should be able to stand on its own, but still be a cohesive part of the whole. And that is why I say that the topic sentence is a mini argument that you will then defend throughout that paragraph with an example and an explanation of that example. If you were to walk into the British Museum right now, you would see different exhibits, and those sometimes cycle a bi-monthly basis. But you would probably walk through some doors that would say what the exhibit was, archaeology in 1800s Britain. And you know that everything in that room is going to be related to archaeology in some way. But you would hope that when you walk up to a glass case and you see the tools that somebody used for an excavation in Egypt, that you would have little descriptors that would make that case on tools sort of stand on its own. And yes, the tools relate to the overarching theme of archaeology in 1800s Britain, but I could go and I could get a little kernel of information that is really useful out of just that case showing the tools that were used. And maybe there's an argument tying those tools together. You know, these tools were advanced for the society at the time. And then I can look at them and I can see the examples and how they support that claim. Your essays are exactly like that. Think of each paragraph as exhibit case, like a case of artifacts. And then think of your entire essay as the collection itself or the exhibit theme itself. You want everything that you put in a case, in a paragraph, to speak to, in some way, that unique theme that you have. But you don't want your paragraphs to be so vague or generic that they can't stand on their own. And this is not to say that you shouldn't have transitions between paragraphs. You can certainly have transitions between paragraphs. What I am more so saying is that you should have some nugget, some information, some argument that is unique in every paragraph so that they are strong, so that you are committing to carrying an argument through your paragraphs that is a subcomponent of the main argument that runs through your entire paper. I hope that makes sense. And I wish I had more time to show you examples of students who do this work really well. But I also want to leave time for questions at the end. So think of your paper in this way. This is an analogy that I found.